What can we learn from attachment theory? What do we need to know? And how can we apply that to our dating life? Thank you so much for tuning into Second Act TV. Today, I am so happy to welcome back one of our favorite guests, Dr. Gary Salyer, the author of Safe to Love Again. Gary, thanks so much for joining me again.
Always a pleasure, Silky. Always a pleasure.
Well, we love to have you on. And I just discovered that one of my other favorite guests, Treva and Robbie, you guys are like, you've been on their show tons of times on a topic exactly what we want to talk about today, which is dating later in life, finding love again, and not making the same mistakes. We tend to fall into patterns. And a lot of people, including yourself, have said and written that our attachment styles really are a good predictor of how we connect and who we choose. So let's talk about that today, Gary. What can we learn from attachment theory? What do we need to know? And how can we apply that to our dating life?
So, we're talking about the way your brain is wired to love and be loved back. Okay. So, if you have an attachment style, let's just review that. And these will show up in predictable ways in relationships, whether you're friends, but dating relationship, professional ones, they tend to show up. There's a predictable pattern for each of them. There's four, but the three we most people deal with. There's the secure. The secure are those. It's also they're called free. They're not preoccupied with past pain. They feel really comfortable depending and being depended on by somebody. They're usually pretty good at picking partners, but they trust the relationship. You get in a fight, we know we're going to work it out. And they're good at noticing, feelings and being attentive to feelings. There's also the anxious. Now, the anxious grew up usually with this pattern of attention and love is there, not there, not there, not there. If you've ever tried to nail down a board on a floor that keeps coming up one end or the other, and then you get really frustrated, and then some part goes and gets every nail on the planet to nail that thing down. That's what they do. They're always trying to nail love down, so to speak. Their worst fear is when does love go away? It's not going to stay. So they're anxious. And they grew up to be preoccupied with their past pain. How many times they've been lost, how many people dates went wrong, whatever. And then there's the avoidance. The avoidance, they grew up with it wasn't there very often, the attention, the love. So they learned to their worst fears, I'll depend on somebody or I'll be dependent upon. They tend to be dismissive of feelings. Oh, I don't need those feelings. We just need a little logic to help us out here. And so they tend to be emotionally distant. They can be in the same room and it feels like they're on Pluto. And they won't really care that much or attune to your feelings. A lot of times, too, they're a little comitophobic. So those are the three types.
If I can just make sure I'm understanding. So basically, secure is where you want to be. You that's what
Exactly.
we aspire to be. And I believe most people, or like 50% or so, actually are. It's that the other two, the avoidant and the anxious. Is that right? Avoidant and
Yes.
anxious. That
Yes.
where the trouble starts, and that's where we need to, I suppose, identify if we fall into that category, if we're having relationship issues that are a pattern. And there's tests to that. I'm going to link to a couple tests. If you have some, you can send me the links too that you think are, particularly good. But I think that's the first step is figuring out what you are and then maybe what your
Yes.
partner is.
Well, all you have to know is your worst fear when does love go away? So there's a breakup. Usually, if there's a breakup, this is where you spot it. And when there's a breakup, you just go inside. I'm not worthy. What went wrong? You talk to as many people for as long, for hours and hours, and you obsess and you are just preoccupied. What could I have done wrong? Why wasn't I good enough? How come it never works out? And that pain almost never goes by. And some part is always looking out for. So you're anxious. Why didn't you text me? Right back. You waited a whole hour to text me about what were you thinking? Do you still love me? And you've got this anxious quality. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the avoidance breakup happens and they go, it's just amazing. I can break up with somebody and 3-4 days later, a week later, I'm good to go. They're not that attached. They're not that, and, they'll say, yeah, well, it just didn't work out.
So you definitely don't want to get an anxious and avoidant. If that becomes together, you're heading for a disaster there.
But the thing is most time the avoidance and the anxious attract each other. I call it the law of attraction from hell. See, the thing is, the secure are wired to love and be loved back. They can spot the antics and drama of both sides, and they don't tend to pick those anxious or avoidance, leaving them in a dating pool to pretty much find each other. And if the secure are in the dating pool, 85% of the time they pick another secure partner because their picker's pretty good. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the anxious often are attracted to avoidance because that little bit of distance that the anxious picks up at first seems like, oh my God, I won't have some enmeshed spouse. But then it becomes the law of attraction from hell.
Well, and theoretically, Gary, this all, in writing, this all makes sense. And you've said that too, in theory, this all makes sense. It makes perfect sense. But how do we get this into a practical application?
Let's look at how, like on a first couple of dates, right? You can actually see it before the first couple of dates. Have you ever noticed the guys that have these sunglasses? They look like Secret Service agents.
I was married to one of those.
You were married to a Secret Service agent?
That's another story.
But there's the Secret Service agent wears black glasses so you can't see who they're looking at. They don't want you to see into them. That's a clue. They don't want to be seen. They don't want to be full disclosure. They don't want their emotions. So they show up. When they show up, they may take you on a really nice date, but it's got an agenda. Just to say that. You can spot. Sometimes they will just sit way back when they get their picture, and you think, why are they 30 feet from the camera? And the reason being, they're subconsciously telling you what sort of distance that they're with, right?
Interesting.
Okay. So you can spot this. Now, so when they show up, after a couple of dates, you'll notice that they don't pick them up on feelings. And a lot, now there's varieties of avoidance. A lot of times they're dismissive, and there's one type of avoidant that you can tell them the first 4 dates, I don't like sushi. And the 5th date, they ask you again, would you like to go out for sushi? There's also another one, that the players, there's some player ones, they have learned, oh yeah, you make sure you attend to their whatever their requests are, because they're going to have another request that night. I was on stage with a guy, and he was a love coach. And a woman asked him, do you believe a woman should have sex on the first date? And he said, well, I can tell you for myself, there wouldn't be a second date. That's clearly avoidant. Now, if that's what you want to do, that's one thing. But if you're looking for long-term love, that's not the best strategy. It just isn't. There's all sorts of research about that. So they tend to not share influence. You'll get this feeling there's an agenda one way or another. They don't share influence. They miss cues, or or if they do pick up cues, you're feeling a little manipulated, and you don't get a chance. They don't disclose much. So, and they'll say things like, "So, what was it like as a child?" If you wouldn't ask that on a first date, but if you ask that question, "What was it like growing up?" Oh, it was pretty good. Yeah, there was always food on the table.
So do you run from that? What's your advice there? Do you avoid, pardon the pun, do you, people like that, or is there a way to work with that?
Unless they're willing to work with it, unless they come in and they're working on it, what you're going to get is a less than emotionally satisfying relationship.
Okay, good.
Uh, I have worked with both anxious and avoidance. Both of them, when they get married, bring in patterns that don't do a marriage any good. There's no difference. They can both do destructive behaviors in terms of a long-term lasting relationship. They just do it from the opposite ends. The anxious will show up on dates too, you know, and they can be super, super, super attentive. In fact, I was just dealing with a client, and within 2 weeks, guy wants a committed relationship.
Mm.
The word love, I love you, comes up, second or third date. and there is this, it feels like controlling neediness, right? They will often, they're very good at responding to text. Immediately they will respond to you. And you think how attentive these people are, right? Um, but they're going to ask for that back. If you're at a meeting, a board meeting for 2 hours, and you don't text them back, where were you? Why didn't you text me back? If you and that you'll get, and then you'll say, I got 12 texts from them.
Yeah,
you
that's not
know,
good.
they overbid for attention. They don't have a sense of this middle spot where the secure live, where there's a right to go out and live your own world and come back to we. They're not comfortable with this separation. I once had a client, they were married, in which the problem was she would text him 60 times during the day. And the telltale story was she goes, "Yeah, I texted him, and he only texted me back 30 times. This tells me he's an avoidant." You know, I was almost shocked at hearing that 30 times in 8 hours, 32 would have been every quarter hour in an 8 hour day. So, this they tend to get involved with drama quickly. But notice that they'll show up, the avoidants tend to show up a little aloof, and there's always some form of distance. Now, if you ask the anxious on the second or third or fourth day, what was it like growing up for you? You better come ready for the listen for the next 3 hours. Oh my God, it was never stopped. My mother was this, and you'll hear an hour on the mom and an hour on the dad, and you'll leave the date feeling like they never asked about me.
Mm-hmm.
Or they can be intrusive. Well, tell me, really, 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 Silky. What was it like for you too? I'm really interested. Was your mom and dad really loving? Tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more. You know, and you get the feeling that there's some sort of tar paper that surrounds the interaction. So,
So when you
yeah,
say so, now we know now that 25% of people are one or the other. So
mhm.
50% of all the people out there are one or the other. 50% are secure. Then there's a few in there that are really screwed up, and we won't even worry about that right now.
It's 50% are securely attached. There's 25% that are anxiously attached. 20% that are avoidantly attached, and 5%, are what's called disorganized, or you can call them anxious avoidant.
Yeah. So what you just described is somewhat, I mean, you can recognize that. We maybe it's a little extreme, I don't know, but it eventually that's how it shows up and even early on. So we can recognize that. How do we though, if we're one of those, and they're listening to this conversation, how apt are they to recognize that in themselves?
A lot of times avoidance, they don't. They don't do that level of introspection. They're not comfortable doing the therapy. If they go to therapy, some part wants to get out. They're there because they've been drug in, usually by the woman, you know. The anxious are the ones, let's go do therapy right away. It's a second date. I know we can work this out. I know we have problems already, but can we just start doing couple therapy on the third date, fourth date, right? I've had couples, I've had singles come to me saying, well, maybe I can bring my boyfriend. How long have you been dating? 3 or 4 weeks.
Oh,
The red flags are already there.
yeah.
Yeah. But they thinking, how can I turn that red flag into a green flag? Now, if you're avoidant, it's important to realize that at some point in time, a good relationship deserves closeness. It deserves commitment, and it deserves attuned attention. It deserves repairs. There is that feeling of, I can only give so much. Actually, you can give more. But the part of you that learned not to depend or be dependent on said, let's tone down my needs. And when you tone down your own needs, you tone down your partner's needs, and that's never a good thing.
No.
The anxious, you can't, you come in too loaded, too suspicious. When does love go away? And it's okay to relax. Let it unfold. There can be some distance. You don't need assurances right now. There doesn't have to be this deep, heartfelt, therapeutic, like you're going deep on the first couple of dates. Allow there to be fun without pressure.
Right.
And that emotional pressure to tamp everything down, where are they at? You gotta get yourself a little bit of a chill pill and expect that there'll be a decent response back. And if there's not after 4 or 5 days, then okay, I can let them go. So, the positive thing about this is that these can be changed.
Yes.
That's the real positive thing. All that can be changed. It's just at some point in time, the best deal available for an avoidant was to pull away. I guarantee at one point in time early in childhood, that was the best deal. And for the anxious, the best deal was to pound at the door till midnight until they let your butt in. Right?
Very interesting.
Yeah, there's real hope. This is not a lifelong death sentence. This is simply an adjustment that can be readjusted.
Well, and it's a huge, huge awareness, working on yourself, becoming aware of this, or just in other people. And I know you go deeply into that in your book, Safe to Love Again, how to release the pain of past relationships and create the love you deserve. I love this book, and I want to recommend it again to everyone. It really explains how to get past this, but it does take some work. Gary, anything else you want to add before we close today?
The only thing I want you to know that everybody deserves to have a lasting love, and all of this is adaptable. It's all changeable. There's no such thing as an unresourceful person. There's only unresourceful states. What if you stop saying I am anxious or I am avoidant and have some part of me wants to act. Some part of me wants to act anxious or avoidant. How can I choose better for me and my future partner? If we have that little bit of decision making that, hey, I can have a little separation from me and my love style, then we don't feel the shame or the guilt or the desperation. Now we've got an I that can feel empowered to change it. And that's there's a part of you that has the empowerment inside. It's just labeled as for somebody else.
Yeah.
And just work with someone that can give you that sense of empowerment to change it all.
Well, we'll link obviously to all of your information if anybody wants to get in touch with you directly. And Gary, thank you so much for your time again. This is, to me, it's an enlightening subject, just like Treva said. And if anybody else has recognized this in themselves, just know that's the first step to getting better. So, Gary, thank you. We'll see you again soon on Second Act TV.
Thank you.
If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. The button is right over here. Just click on through to YouTube, and when you see the little bell right next to the subscribe button, hit that too. We'll notify you every time we launch a new video. See you next time.